The air is thick tonight, not hot, not humid, just thick. The kind of quiet weight that makes even the stars seem like they're holding their breath. You step into a corridor of carved stone, warm underfoot, the edges worn smooth by generations of sandal and slipper. The flicker of oil lamps casts long shadows down the palace walls, their soft golden light dancing over carvings of lions, winged bulls, and robed men with beards so meticulously styled, you wonder how long they stood still. For the artists welcome to Persepolis. The scent hits you before you understand what it is. A curl of resin in the air, sweet but smoky, with an edge of something darker, frankincense maybe, or myrrh, or the kind of old-world musk that tells you very politely that you're modern. Deodorant is a little out of its depth here. You follow the corridor, footsteps hushed against the stone, and behind a silk-curtained archway you glimpse a gathering. Not quite a party, but certainly not business. Men in layered robes speak in voices too soft to catch, and everything, every gesture, every pause feels deliberate. One man lifts a small vial and tilts it onto his fingers. He presses the oil into his beard like it's part of a sacred rite, and, in a way, it is. Perfume here isn't an accessory. It's a signature, a shield, a form of silent warfare wrapped in luxury. In the Achaemenid Empire, the heart of Persian power scent is political. The fragrance you wear might say more than the words you use, that amber you noticed in the hallway. It's doing more work than your best public speaking class. Historians agree that Darius I, the same Darius who ruled half the known world and built the grand terraces of Persepolis, was not just a military tactician, but a man who understood the value of atmosphere. The empire ran on logistics and roads, yes, but also on image. And nothing sticks in the mind quite like a man who smells like burnt cinnamon, sandalwood, and a tax increase. You probably won't make it through this day. Not because it's dangerous, but because everything around you is so elegantly calculated. You'll be mentally curled up in a corner by midday, rethinking your shampoo choices. Before we go further, gently float your thumb toward the like button. Not because we asked, but because somewhere deep down, your inner history nerd deserves it. Subscribe if you'd like more journeys like this, slow, strange, and filled with the scent of empires. And tell us in the comments, where in the world are you listening from? And what time is it there? We love knowing which quiet corners of the world our stories drift into. Now let's ease into tonight's journey. You walk slowly into the main courtyard of the palace. There's a breeze now dry and fragrant, like it's picked up 1,000 years of spice trade as it slipped through the desert. The walls rise around you like cliffs, carved with scenes of tribute from far-off lands. Ethiopians carrying ivory, Medes with elaborate robes, Elamites with silver bowls and sullen expressions. Each group brings a gift, but almost all bring perfume or incense. One even holds what looks like a gold-handled censer, swinging gently, trailing smoke like a small weather system of its own. Scent, in this world, is status. It's how you show respect and maybe hint at your own importance while you're at it. A minor official, maybe a scribe, drifts past you wearing a robe the color of old pomegranates. You catch the trail of something floral, rose maybe, or iris, but grounded in something resinous. It's not a random choice. This man wants to be remembered. Probably also wants a promotion. Obscure detail of the evening. Elite. Persian courtiers often stored perfume in hollowed-out rings or beads, ready to be released with a twist or a tap. Subtle, sneaky, and probably a nightmare during high pollen. Seasoned, and though it's well documented that scent held deep cultural weight, there's still scholarly debate over just how personalized those ancient blends were. Did high officials have signature scents? Or was there a sort of imperial dress code for noses? You pass under a gate carved with griffins. The sun is fading now, but the air still hums. You stop, take a deep breath, and realize something quietly extraordinary. You're not just in a palace. Night falls gently over Persepolis, and the courtyard glows under a mosaic of lanterns. You're seated now, cross-legged on a woven mat with cushions that feel more ceremonial than comfortable. Across from you, a man who looks like he's never rushed in his life offers a clay dish of roasted figs and leans back with the grace of someone who knows he won't be interrupted. And behind him, in a kind of slow-motion reveal, two servants light a brazier filled with scented resin. The smoke rises like a slow whisper, curling around the columns, drifting upward like it has better places to be. You're starting to see it. Perfume here isn't just scent, it's tempo. It slows the room down, smooths over awkward silences, cloaks the walls with dignity. The brazier doesn't just perfume the air, it controls the pace of conversation. Low chime sounds from somewhere behind the curtain. Another guest has arrived, judging by the slight uptick in rosewater concentration. It's subtle enough to notice, not enough to distract. That's the Persian way. Back in the city of Susa, Persepolis' older, quieter sibling, it's said that courtiers would scent their garments by locking them in cedar-lined boxes filled with sachets of spices and flower petals. They called it dressing the breath of the cloth, a phrase that is both deeply poetic and sounds like it belongs on a very niche Etsy shop. The man beside you finally speaks. His voice is soft but precise, and he refers to Darius not just as king but the scented one. It might sound strange, but not here. In this culture, being perfumed isn't vanity. It's evidence of refinement, self-control, and yes, divine favor. He pours you a drink date wine with a hint of cardamom and asks, almost offhandedly, if the aroma reminds you of home. You say yes, even though it doesn't, but that's all right. Lying is just another form of polite agreement around here. There's a mural behind him, one you didn't notice earlier. It shows the king seated on a throne under a canopy of palm leaves. Beside him, a servant holds a jar of something smoky. And in the background, Dancers twirl beneath plumes of scented mist. This isn't exaggeration. Ancient sources, some Greek, some Babylonian, describe royal processions trailing clouds of incense so dense they'd cling to skin for days. The idea was simple. If you encountered the king, your body remembered. And scholars still wonder whether these processions were more spectacle than practicality. After all, is it truly necessary to perfume an entire road for a single chariot? The Persians seem to think so. You shift slightly, and the breeze returns gentle now, almost conspiratorial. It brings with it the scent of saffron and pine resin, stirred up from some far-off corner of the palace. You wonder, not for the first time, how anyone managed to think clearly in such an olfactory kaleidoscope. But that's the trick. Thinking clearly isn't the goal here. Feeling something is. Awe, respect, maybe even a touch of fear. And as you lean back against the cushion, eyelids a little heavier than they were a moment ago, you realize this. You've been breathing history this whole time, and it smells surprisingly good. The fire in the brazier has burned low, and the scent has shifted. Where earlier it whispered of rose and cedar, now it's heavier, darker, almost brooding. Maybe it's the argor wood, or maybe it's the mood of the evening, changing with the wind. You rise, guided not by command, but by atmosphere. The court is dispersing in that unspoken way of all well-oiled aristocracies. No clapping, no shouting, just a ripple of movement. Like silk falling, you walk alone now, past the quiet gardens behind the palace. They're geometric and precise, but the vines have softened the lines, blurring them with time. Somewhere nearby, a small fountain chatters lazily, more decoration than necessity in a city like this. Water is precious, but perfume? Somehow. Even more so. In ancient Persia, water cleansed the body. Scent cleansed the spirit, or so the Magi believed. You pass one of their temples, low, square, unimpressive, except for the embers smoldering at its center. Sacred fire, they say, must never go out. A spiritual symbol, but also, honestly, a decent heater. A man kneels nearby, sprinkling something into the flames. You pause, curious, and catch a puff of the blend benzoin and dried orange peel, with something bitter tucked beneath it, like a warning, obscure tidbit of the evening. Some Zoroastrian rites involved burning herbs to guide the breath of truth. The belief was that scented smoke could carry prayers more efficiently to the heavens, like an incense-powered mailman. With unusually good job security, the man looks up and nods toward you, not as a greeting, but as acknowledgement. You exist. He seems to say you're here. That's enough. You continue walking, and somewhere a flute begins to play. Not in your honor, don't flatter yourself, but as part of a routine far older than your footsteps. The air hums with nighttime stillness, and you finally begin to understand the real purpose of these perfumes. They slow you down. They force you to inhabit your skin more fully. They ask you not to rush. That's the power play. In a world of speed and impulse, the Persian elite made their dominance felt by doing everything slower, eating, speaking, bathing, ruling. Even the scent took its time, unfolding in layers, like a story it knew you'd stick around to hear. And just for contrast, consider this. Ancient Greek soldiers often described Persian warriors as soft, mocked them for their use of cosmetics and fragrant oils. But then they got slaughtered in battle, so interpret that however you like. You sit by the fountain now. A fig leaf drifts past on the water. You don't catch it. Why would you? Let it float. Everything here does. And you realize you haven't spoken in hours. You haven't needed to. The scent has said everything. It's morning again, not that you noticed right away. The palace wakes like an animal, stretching quiet at first, then gradually unfolding its limbs into a graceful sprawl of human routine. You rise reluctantly from your cushion of dreams and let the breeze remind you that this place doesn't care what time it is in your world. Someone brings you breakfast. You didn't ask, but it arrives anyway. Flatbread, honey, melon, and a small dish of goat cheese that tastes slightly better than it smells. There's also a bowl of something else, uncooked grain steeped in warm rose water. It tastes like perfume, but politely the servant who brings it wears a robe that smells like juniper smoke and something faintly medicinal, maybe camphor, or the ancient equivalent of "please don't cough on the king." In the distance, horns sound. Once, just once, and you notice movement beyond the walls. Soldiers, but not marching, just practicing. They move with the quiet confidence of men who know their place in the world is secure. And perfumed. Military historians often forget this part, but ancient Persian soldiers were issued scented oils as part of their daily rations. Not cologne, functional blends to soothe muscles, protect from the sun, and, well, not smell like death. It wasn't just about comfort, it was morale. A perfumed army is a proud army, and possibly a slippery one, but that's another discussion. You leave the courtyard and wander into the shaded halls of the Apadana, the grand audience chamber. The ceiling is impossibly high. The columns tower above you, each carved with details so precise they might as well be painted. Birds, lions, people frozen mid-step as though surprised by their own immortality. It smells like history in here. Not metaphorically, literally. Stone and wood baked by sun, cooled by centuries, holding traces of every fire and ceremony that's ever passed through. And incense. Always incense. You spot a priest in white robes walking past with a small jar in hand. He's muttering to himself. You catch the words light, truth, and something that sounds suspiciously like a complaint about pigeons. This part of the palace, it turns out, is cleaned every morning with rose water and mint oil. Not because it's dirty, but because it shouldn't be. Cleanliness here is layered, not just visual, but aromatic. Obscure curiosity of the day. Persian noblemen sometimes trained their dogs with scented collars. each command paired with a specific fragrance so the dog could smell the command. Which sounds impressive until you realize your dog still ignores you even when you yell with a steak in hand. As you explore, one thought repeats itself like the echo of your own footsteps. Everything here is designed to make you feel small, but in a dignified way. And you don't mind. You're content to be a witness, because witnessing in this world is an honor. There's a corridor tucked behind the Apadana that few people use unless they're meant to. You, of course, have no such reason, but you wander down it anyway, following the scent. It's sharper hairdryer, more resinous. Like sage and sun-baked stone had a thoughtful disagreement and decided to collaborate. The air shifts as you walk, thinner but charged, like it's carrying secrets. Eventually, you come to a low chamber. Not grand, not ceremonial, just quiet. And that's its charm. Inside, a handful of scribes sit at reed desks, their styluses ticking softly against clay tablets. The scent here isn't designed for show, it's for focus. Sandalwood, bay leaves, a pinch of saffron. Someone has burned a small cone of incense in the corner, and the smoke is behaving unusually well, drifting upward in a perfect meditative line. This is the records room. The beating bureaucratic heart of the empire. You'd think the Persians ran their empire with swords, but mostly they used ledgers. Lists of taxes, lists of workers, lists of sheep. The Achaemenid bureaucracy was legendary for its precision and for smelling like a high-end spice. Major fact of the day. The royal archives at Persepolis preserved contracts sealed with wax and scented oils. These weren't just legal documents. They were aromatic time capsules. Want to know who owed how many goats to whom? Just follow the smell of thyme and beeswax. A scribe glances up at you briefly, gives a polite nod, then returns to his work. You notice his fingers are stained yellow at the tips, turmeric, maybe, or something worse. You choose not to ask. He reaches into a drawer and pulls out what looks like a writing tool, but it's actually a tiny jar. He dabs some oil behind his ears before returning to the tablet. Not for vanity, just habit. Maybe belief. That writing with scent sharpens memory. Or maybe it keeps the clay from cracking. Historians still debate whether scribes were encouraged to wear fragrance as a performance of literacy or simply to mask the scent of drying ink and sun-warmed clay. Either way, it works. The room doesn't smell like work. It smells like calm. Like someone finally figured out how to make admin duties romantic. You watch a while longer, then step back into the corridor where the scent of paper gives way to something greener. Remember the gardens from earlier? They're back. And now they're humming. The royal gardens of Persepolis are not what you'd expect. They're not overflowing or wild. No tangled vines or surprise fountains. Instead, they're deliberate. Square plots, tall cypress trees, low hedges of lavender and thyme. You wander among them like a guest in someone's mind, orderly, quiet, but full of hidden meaning. A gardener kneels beside a patch of flowering herbs, hands dusted with pollen and pride. He looks up, smiles faintly, then goes back to pruning. No rush, no words. Just the low rustle of shears and a breeze full of sweet rosemary. You pause beside a row of lily. Their perfume is strong-heady, almost indecent, but the wind takes just enough away to make it bearable. The trick of these gardens isn't just the plants. It's the wind, the elevation, the way the architects shaped space to move scent like water. Obscure gem of the day. The Persians used to train vines along walls, not just for shade or food, but to infuse the air near entryways with scent. A kind of botanical welcome mat. You step under one now, and it smells like jasmine with a PhD. A servant walks by with a tray of infused oils. You recognize rose, of course, and maybe cardamom, but one bottle smells oddly like leather and almonds. Intriguing, possibly deadly. You don't ask. And here's a delightful contradiction. This empire, famous for roads and conquest and structure, spent enormous resources building places where nothing was supposed to happen. These gardens weren't arenas. They were pauses, breathing spaces. You take a seat on a low stone bench. The cushion is warm from the sun. A bird chirps once and then seems to reconsider. Somewhere nearby, water murmurs in a narrow channel lined with polished pebbles, and then, floating in from the edge of perception, a scent you haven't met yet. It smells like burnt sugar and pine. You close your eyes. It's not dramatic, not overwhelming, just ancient. Scholars are still unsure whether this particular blend was ceremonial, or simply what happened when cedar oil mixed with sun-warmed sap and got lucky. Either way, it works. You sit a while longer, and no one disturbs you. The world shrinks to scent and sound. The breeze carries away your thoughts like petals down a stream. And for the first time since entering the palace, you don't feel like a visitor. You feel like part of the place. Later, as the heat softens and shadows stretch long across the stone, you find yourself inside a pavilion that overlooks the eastern terrace. It's not grand, not gilded, just elegant. A space designed for the kind of conversation that happens between people who already know what they're going to say. The cushions here are arranged in a wide semicircle, and each one smells slightly different. You sit on one that hints at vetiver and clove, a combination you weren't expecting, but somehow it fits. A quiet confidence. Across from you, a court musician strums a timbre, a kind of long-necked lute. The notes spiral into the air like incense. You can't tell if he's practicing or performing, and he doesn't seem to care which. The scent in the pavilion is more ceremonial, layers upon layers. You pick out cinnamon bark, rose absolute. Perhaps a trace of a popanax, an ancient gum resin with a name that sounds made up but definitely isn't. One of the elder courtiers, his beard long, his robes layered like sediment, leans toward you and murmurs something about the scent of dignity. He means it literally. In this part of the palace, fragrance is status, but it's also memory. Each scent layered into these cushions has been chosen to evoke a specific past, a battle won, a peace brokered, a royal birth. Smell, here, is history's shorthand. Major fact of the day. The Achaemenid kings commissioned entire scent ceremonies for coronations. Priests burned rare resins on hilltops, and the wind was meant to carry the king's scent across the valley. A fragrant declaration. Power lives here now. And yes, it sounds dramatic. Because it was. You notice something else. There are no harsh smells in Persepolis. No rot. No waste. Not because those things don't exist, but because they've been deliberately designed out of sight. The empire runs on illusion as much as it does on coin. A light drizzle starts a rare thing. The air changes instantly. Petrichor joins the scent symphony, and everything feels more grounded. Even the musician pauses, nods, and changes the key. Obscure note of the evening. Certain royal pavilions were scented seasonally, adjusted not for temperature, but mood. Spring might call for citrus and hyacinth. Autumn, labdanum and fig. Imagine changing your entire identity. Just because the leaves turn dot, the drizzle fades. The scent lingers. You close your eyes and listen to the fading notes of the timbre. And you start to wonder, when did the world forget how to make waiting feel like this? Night returns, draped in velvet. You step into the harem court quietly, cautiously, though no one stops you. The space is delicate and still, like a secret mid-breath. There's no debauchery here, no drama. Just low voices, a few woven lanterns, and the sound of silk whispering against silk. The air is thick with perfume, yes, but not in an overwhelming way. It's curated, controlled. One scent from each doorway, each alcove. You recognize jasmine, iris, a sharp citrus you can't name. Possibly bergamot. Possibly ambition. The women here, concubines, consorts, diplomats in dresses, walk with the quiet gravity of people who know exactly how powerful they are. And their scent is part of that power. In the royal harem. Every woman's perfume is unique, crafted for her, named for her. Some wear blends that take months to make. Others have oils extracted from flowers that only bloom one night a year, and they remember each other's blends, each other's moods, each other's silent victories. Tonight, they're painting with smoke, placing tiny braziers at the thresholds of their chambers, each emitting a signature blend. You pass by one and inhale rose and mint. Another smells of honey and crushed sage. It's not just aesthetics, it's chess. If your rival's blend includes something expensive and rare, you'll know she's been favored. If her scent is too assertive, she might be making a move. If it's subtle, maybe she's retreating. Major fact of the night. In elite Persian harems, perfume wasn't just adornment, it was a language. Scholars have uncovered tablets referencing fragrance consultations before court appearances. Choosing the right blend could influence royal decisions. Obscure delight. Some concubines kept scent journals, tracking their blends like emotional weather reports. Today, narrowly, cedar and mild contempt. Historians still debate how much sway harem women had over policy, but no one questions their influence in shaping the emotional climate of the court. You stop near a fountain. Water trickles over polished onyx. A young woman kneels nearby, dabbing. Oil behind her ears from a gold-dipped vial. She meets your gaze briefly, not a challenge, not an invitation. Just recognition. You are both people passing through scent and silence, and then she's gone. The trace of her perfume following her like a ribbon in the dark. You breathe in, and suddenly you realize memory smells like this. The moon has moved again. You've lost track of how many hours you've wandered, or maybe it's days by now. Time in Persepolis doesn't behave the way you expect. It slows, coils, folds itself into scent and stillness. You find yourself climbing a set of broad steps that lead nowhere in particular, just upward. And that seems like enough. Each step is shallow, meant for slow, deliberate movement. You can't rush on these stones. Not without looking ridiculous. At the top, a breeze greets you like an old friend. You're higher now, above the gardens, above the pavilions, near the edge of the platform where Persepolis overlooks the dry plains below. The horizon stretches like parchment, still warm from the sun's memory. There's a structure here, open on all sides, its pillars framing the stars like art. This is the fire altar. Not the most famous one, not the largest, but the one kept alive by a quiet priest and his patient assistant. They nod to you, but do not speak. The air up here is clean, thinner, cooler. But the scent, oh, the scent is something else. It's fire, yes. But more than that. There's something in the embers, galbanum, perhaps, or storax. Old world resins that don't just burn. They bloom. The priest carefully places herbs into the flame, murmuring a prayer you don't understand but feel anyway. The smoke doesn't rise straight up, it swirls and dances as if performing for the stars. Major historical fact: Persian fire temples often used specific scent blends for different phases of worship. Morning prayers called for uplifting citrus and cedar. Evening rites leaned toward calming myrrh and cypress. Worship by aroma. A gust of wind carries the smoke toward you. It smells like reflection, like clean endings. The assistant refills the oil lamp beside you. You glance at him and he smiles, just enough to tell you he's seen people have this moment before. The one you're having. And here's something strange. This platform was once used for royal announcements. Yet it feels like a confession booth. The wind pulls secrets from your chest you didn't know were hiding. You sit. You stay a while. Obscure tidbit. Some high-ranking priests refuse to wear fragrance unless it was earned through silence. A poetic way of saying they avoided scent until they'd spent enough time meditating. The opposite of gym deodorant. Culture. Historians still disagree on what exactly was burned in the king's private fire chamber. Some say it was cedar and rose. Others argue for rarer blends, oud soaked in saffron, spikenard imported from the Himalayas. The truth, perhaps, is that no one ever really knew except the man himself. The stars above are scattered like spilled sugar. The wind carries your thoughts far from here. You feel weightless, and for the first time you realize this entire city is perfumed memory. You're not just visiting. You're dissolving into it. By the time you descend from the altar, the palace has gone quiet in a different way. Not asleep, just settled. Even the torches flicker more gently now, as if they've decided to stop showing off. You find yourself in a corridor you hadn't seen before. Lower ceilings, narrower walls, the kind of space meant for utility, not ceremony. And it smells different here. Still perfumed, of course, but humbler, earthier, like lavender grown too close to the soil. Like rosemary rubbed between fingers that carry calluses. This is where the workers pass, the ones who oil the doors, feed the cats, whisper jokes to each other in the kitchens, and fix the fountains when they clog. You pause near a side room, where laundry is being folded by a pair of older women. They chat in low tones, laughing occasionally, the sound as warm as the soap they're using. The scent in the room is gentle olive oil, ash, and rose petals dried until they crumble like old parchment. You nod. They nod back. No one's particularly impressed by your presence, which is maybe the highest honor you've received here so far. Major fact, while nobles scented their bodies, servants often scented their clothes instead. It was a practical form of distinction, clothing stored with herbs to preserve freshness, rather than displayed as a luxury. One woman lifts a freshly folded robe and wafts it toward her face, eyes closing just slightly. You catch the smile. It's the same look people give when they find an old sweater that still smells like someone they loved. Obscure moment of the night. Archaeological evidence suggests some palace staff were assigned not by skill or lineage, but by their personal scent. Yes, really. Those with naturally pleasant or neutral aromas were favored for indoor roles. Historians argue about this one a lot. You leave them to their folding. Further down the corridor, a spice storeroom waits in shadow. Rows of clay jars sealed with beeswax and string. Some labeled, some not. The air is heavy here. Not oppressive, just full. It smells like decision-making, cinnamon, asafoetida, crushed cardamom. You swear you smell a peppercorn that could start an argument. This room isn't just for flavor. It's for ceremony. It's where scents are born. Someone enters behind you, a young perfumer, judging by the tray he's carrying. He gives you a tight nod, moves to a low table, and begins blending. No talking. Just instinct. Like a musician tuning an instrument that doesn't make sound. He dips a stick into one of the jars, brings it close to his nose, pauses, then shakes his head and starts again. This is how perfume is made here, not by formula, by feeling. You Ask what he's making. He says only this, a warning. You decide not to ask further because you understand scent in this world is how you speak without speaking, how you warn, how you welcome, how you remember. And this warning? It smells like orange peel, bay leaf, and something sharp that catches in your chest. You leave before it settles too deep. There's a kind of scent that only comes in the hours before dawn when the fires are low, the gardens are still damp with dew, and everyone who is meant to be asleep is either plotting or praying. You're awake, of course. There's no chance of rest now, not with that perfume from the storeroom still clinging to your mind like a whispered riddle. You walk the palace perimeter. The outer colonnades are silent, open to the desert's slow breath. The stones beneath your feet are cold, but not unfriendly. You hear the distant bleating of goats. Somewhere out there, beyond the city walls, life continues without incense or ritual, just smoke, sweat, and the occasional muttered curse about sand. But even here, at the edges of empire, scent is present. The guard standing watch doesn't wear robes or golden belts. His armor is worn, his beard is uneven. But when he nods at you, the breeze carries something unexpected: leather oil and crushed sage. Practical, not poetic, but still deliberate. The Persian elite believed even soldiers should carry a trace of the court on their skin, a way to remind enemies and themselves that they didn't just serve power. They wore it. Major fact of the dawn, Herodotus, the famously gossipy Greek historian, once noted that Persian men applied perfume before battle, not as vanity, but as ritual. If they died, they wanted their bodies to greet the afterlife in dignity, or at least smelling like something better than fear. You reach a low wall and sit, overlooking the plain. The sky is just beginning to lighten, and the scent changes with it. Cool stone, wet dust, the faint sweetness of the first flowering shrubs, obscure custom in certain rural courts. Before any long journey, nobles would pass through a perfume gate, 2 columns of carved cedar set aflame with dried herbs. The belief was that the smoke would carry away doubt, and sometimes lice. Behind you, a door creaks open. A servant appears, blinking sleep from his eyes, holding a tray with 2 ceramic cups. He doesn't speak, just offers one, then sits beside you with the other. The drink smells of anise and barley. Bitter, warm, strange. You sip. He does too. No words. The moment tastes like trust and anise. Mostly anise. By mid-morning, the palace is awake in full. You'd think the scent would be overwhelming by now, a cacophony of rose oil and ambition, but instead it feels orchestrated, like someone's behind the scenes adjusting volume knobs on the incense burners. You're in the marketplace today. Not the public one beyond the gates, but the internal court exchange where scribes, tailors, chefs, and yes, perfumers mingle under striped awnings, haggling in whispers so soft they're practically gossip. Here, the smell is layered like a stew, warm bread, date syrup, sweat, polished wood, and, of course, perfume. Dozens of them. Some for sale, some being tested, and some simply trailing behind a confident set of shoulders. You stop at a booth lined with vials, glass, and clay, tall and squat, labeled in delicate old Persian script. The vendor is elderly, with a voice like a rusted bell and hands stained from decades of mixing. He gestures toward a small silver jar. "This," he says, "is for morning." You lift the lid. It smells like black fig, rainwater, and the kind of wood you only burn when someone important has died. Major fact of the market. Persians created perfumes for every state of being: joy, grief, new love, lost love, travel, childbirth. Not just for the body, but for the soul's posture. Some priests even refused to perform certain rites unless the correct scent was present in the room. You point to another vial, smoky, with a bite of citrus. He smiles for betrayal. Obscure gem. In elite circles, sending someone a scented letter was common. But sending them one scented with a rival's signature blend? That was war. Not loud, but unmistakable. The perfume equivalent of a knife in a silk glove. You try a few blends on paper, curious. One smells like almond and quiet confidence. Another like burnt sugar and unresolved conflict. You ask him what that one's called. Divorce. Naturally, historians debate whether the subtler scent languages of ancient Persia were truly codified, or if we're just reading too much into them. But when you inhale divorce, it's hard to argue with the evidence. You leave the booth slightly dizzy. Not from the oils, though your nose is now officially confused, but from the realization that these people built a civilization where feelings had fragrance, and that maybe, just maybe, we haven't evolved much since. Afternoon slouches into the palace like an old cat, warm, indifferent, heavy with memory. The sun glances off the stone in sharp angles now, the shadows longer, cooler. Even the wind seems to be sighing more than blowing. You find your way back to the inner palace, this time to a room reserved for diplomats. It's not labeled as such, but you can tell by the seating. Low cushions arranged in neutral symmetry. No throne, no elevation. Just careful geometry and equal distance. This is where people come to pretend they're equals. And oh, a scent of diplomacy. Bitter orange, clove, a grounding of vetiver so smooth. You nearly miss the undertone of costus root, a note that smells faintly of wet wool and ambition. You sit beside a painted pillar. The colors have faded over centuries, but the scent hasn't. Here, scent is used not to impress, but to disarm. Major historical fact. Persian envoys often carried scented tokens, small cloths infused with recognizable perfumes. They would leave these in the hands of foreign rulers, on banquet tables, or even in tents. The goal, a soft invasion. One that started in the lungs. Obscure tactic. Some blends were mildly sedative. Nothing dangerous, just calming enough to soften an argument, slow a thought, unhook a grudge. The olfactory equivalent of speaking slowly with an open palm. Across from you, a man speaks to an envoy from Babylon. You can't hear the words, but you can read the tone in the way they lean forward, then back, then forward again. Every gesture floats in a haze of burning SANDALWOOD, and then, almost unnoticed, a servant refreshes the burners. A new scent enters: lemon, balm, and dried plum blossom. Brighter, cooler. The tone shifts. You realize they're not just talking, they're composing. Each phrase another chord in the room's fragrance. Historians still wonder if some Persian diplomatic victories had more to do with psychology than power. After all, it's hard to maintain righteous fury when the air smells like a pastry shop and freshly ironed linen. You stay until the conversation dissolves into nods and quiet exits. The scent lingers. It always does that evening again, but it doesn't sneak up on you this time. You feel it coming like a change in key. The air cools. The marble fades from silver to violet. The palace prepares for sleep. You return to the royal baths, not to bathe, but to observe. They're carved into the side of the mountain, a series of warm pools fed by underground springs and scented with eucalyptus, rosewood, and what you suspect might be aged citrus rind. The water ripples softly. A few nobles soak in silence. One reads, one naps with alarming confidence, and you finally understand. The Persians didn't just wear scent. They lived in it, breathed it, let it become the medium through which time passed. You touch the surface of the water. It smells like the inside of a story. Major cultural note: Persian bathing rituals were less about cleansing and more about transformation. Before certain ceremonies, guests would pass through these baths not just to wash, but to reset, to shed their outer scent and accept the palaces instead. Obscure custom. Certain oils were reserved for bathing only at night. These included blue lotus, which smells like honey in dreams, and something called King's Shadow, a blend whose ingredients are still debated, but may have included night-blooming tuberose and rare Himalayan moss. You rest by the poolside, nose full of sleepy florals. The marble under you is warm where the sun left it, but cooling fast. No one rushes you. Time has melted into fragrance. And as a servant brings a small bowl of chilled quince, you notice the way his hands move through the air, leaving behind a faint trail of amber and myrrh. Even labor here has grace. You bite the quince. It's tart, sweet, sharp. You breathe in the steam from the bath. You exhale. And finally, your thoughts go quiet. Night has swallowed the palace whole. No more conversations. No more arguments disguised as compliments. Just the steady hush of wind moving through cedar beams and the slow exhale of oil lamps dying one by one. You are alone now, though not in the isolating way. More like being. The last to leave a concert, still wrapped in the final note. The scent of the baths is still on your skin. The air outside is cooler now, thick with the hush of distant desert. You walk the palace one last time. No destination. No guide. Just scent pulling you like a thread through memory. You pass the kitchen's dark, except for one flickering flame. Someone's forgotten a bundle of cinnamon sticks on the counter. The warmth draws out their oils. You inhale slowly. The spice wraps itself around your thoughts. A door creaks. A cat slinks past, its fur brushing your calf before vanishing into the columns. It smells faintly of figs. Somehow dot, and then you find it. A chamber you haven't seen before. Tucked behind the archives, small and circular. A domed ceiling opens to the stars. The walls are lined with stone shelves, and on each shelf a vial, a jar, a wrapped cloth, no labels. No locks. You're not supposed to be here. But no one stops. The scent here is old, not stale, just settled. Stories hardened into oil dot, you lift a small container. Inside, crushed blue petals and something citrusy yuzu maybe. It hits you like a memory you haven't had yet. This room is a library of emotions. A silent archive of what the Empire once felt. You walk the rows, stopping here and there. Grief, ambition, seduction, shame, hope. You wonder who built this room. You wonder who it was for. Some say Persian nobles stored their life blends in secret vaults and formulas that evolved with them. When they died, the final version would be burned at their burial. The scent was their legacy. Not just a memory, a presence. Historians argue about whether these rooms ever really existed. But you're standing in one dot, so. Here we are, dot, and as you stand there, the night finally tips into stillness. The last oil lamp gutters out, the scent of ash and cardamom rises, and you feel something you haven't felt in a while. Not nostalgia, not peace, just weightlessness. You turn to leave. The breeze follows you, tugging gently at your sleeves like a child begging for one more story. But this one's done. You walk past the gardens, past the fountain that still murmurs to itself, past the empty halls that now smell like sleep, and then, without really deciding to, you stop. You close your eyes. You breathe in, and you let it all go. The palace fades behind you now. Its scent lingers, not clinging, but resting, like a shawl over your shoulders. The night doesn't rush you. It never did dot above. The stars continue their slow motion drift across the sky, glowing faintly like the last embers of a burned down incense cone. There's no urgency here. No climax. Just exhale. You hear it again, that fountain, somewhere in the dark. Its rhythm soft, unchanging, like a breath that never ends. You feel the stone under your feet still warm in places, still. Whispering stories of sandals and silk and SANDALWOOD. A wind moved through the columns. Not cold, just enough to lift the edge of a memory, just enough to remind you this world was built not to impress, but to endure, and endure it has, in scent, in silence, in the way your chest rises and falls now without needing anything else. There's no one here to wake you. No final act, just the calm, just the air. Just you, and maybe that's the lesson. That sometimes the softest things leave the deepest imprint. That power doesn't always shout. It lingers, like a perfume on a robe someone folded long ago, like a voice that never needed to be raised, like this moment, this breath, this stillness, sleep. Now, you've walked far enough. You've heard enough, and somewhere in your dreams, the air will smell faintly of rose and memory, and you'll know you were here, truly here.